The bridge of the times, Eternal Dominion times, hummed with the quiet efficiency of a well-trained crew. Admiral Torin stood at the central command platform, his 4 eyes scanning the holographic displays that surrounded him. The Velkan Empire's 7th Battle Group had been patrolling this sector for 3 standard months without incident. It was boring work, but necessary. The Outer Rim territories always needed watching. "Admiral, we have an anomaly," called out Sensor Officer Nira from her station. Her voice carried a hint of confusion that immediately caught Torin's attention. "Report," he commanded. Moving toward her console. "Unknown vessel emerging from jump space, Sector 7-9 Alpha. The signature doesn't match anything in our database." Nira's fingers danced across her controls, pulling up more information. "Sir, it's not just unknown. The computer can't even classify the energy readings." Toron felt a cold sensation in his stomach. The Imperial Archive contained information on every spacefaring species across 47 galaxies. 12,000 years of expansion and cataloging meant there shouldn't be any unknowns. Not here. Not anywhere. "Visual," he ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing a vessel unlike anything Torin had seen in his 40 years of service. It was roughly frigate-sized, but its design was all wrong. Sharp angles met in ways that seemed almost aggressive. The hull had a strange matte quality that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. No visible weapons ports, no obvious engine housings, nothing that made sense according to Imperial engineering principles. "Hail them." "All standard frequencies," Torin said, keeping his voice steady. Around the bridge, he could feel his crew's growing unease. Nira worked her console for several minutes, cycling through 800 different communication protocols. Each one met with silence. The strange vessel simply hung there in space, not moving, not responding, just existing where it shouldn't exist. "No response on any channel, Admiral." Toron made his decision. "Signal the battle group. Formation, Delta 7. Surround that vessel. Weapons charged but hold fire. If they don't respond to our next hail, we'll disable their engines and board them." The 17 warships of the 7th Battle Group moved with practiced precision. They were the pride of the Imperial Navy. Heavy cruisers, destroyers, and attack frigates, each one capable of reducing a planet's defenses to ash. Together, they represented enough firepower to conquer entire star systems. As the ships took their positions, Torin tried one more time. "Unknown vessel. This is Admiral Torin of the Velkan Imperial Navy. You have entered controlled space without authorization. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. This is your final warning." Silence. The vessel didn't move, didn't acknowledge, didn't react in any way. "Fire a warning shot across their bow," Toron ordered. "Maybe they'll understand that." The cruiser times Righteous Fury times released a burst of plasma that streaked across the unknown ship's path, close enough to be unmistakable, but far enough to avoid damage. It was a universal gesture. "We can hurt you. So, comply." For a moment, nothing happened. Then everything happened at once. The unknown vessel moved. It didn't accelerate gradually like normal ships. It simply was in one place, and then was in another, moving at speeds that should have torn it apart from the forces involved. The sensor displays went haywire trying to track it. "Evasive maneuvers," Torin shouted, but it was already too late. The times Righteous Fury times exploded. Not from external weapons fire, but from within. Its reactors went critical in a cascade failure that shouldn't have been possible through any known attack method. The ship became a brief new sun before collapsing into debris. "All ships, defensive pattern Omega, return fire." The battle group opened up with everything they had. Plasma cannons, particle beams, missile salvos. Everything in the Imperial arsenal poured toward the small vessel. The shields should have collapsed under such an assault. Any ship should have been vaporized. The unknown vessel slipped through the barrage like water through fingers. It moved in ways that violated every principle of physics that Toron understood. And wherever it went, Imperial ships died. The destroyer times, vengeance times lost all power and went dark, drifting helplessly. The frigate times, sharp talon times broke in half along its central axis, hull integrity failing from some invisible force. The cruiser times, Emperor's Will times managed to land a direct hit with its main cannon, only to watch the beam simply bend around the target and dissipate into space. "What's happening?" Toran demanded, gripping the railing as his ship shook from a near miss. "How is it doing this?" "I don't know, sir." Nira's voice was panicked now. "The weapons are targeting internal systems directly. They're bypassing our shields completely. It's like they know exactly where to hit us. 3 minutes. That's how long the battle lasted. 3 minutes from first shot to the moment when only the time's eternal dominion times remained. Its engines crippled. Life support failing in several sections, but still intact. The unknown vessel approached slowly now, almost casually. Toran watched it come, feeling helpless for the first time in his life. His entire battle group, 17 of the Empire's finest warships, reduced to burning wreckage by a single ship that shouldn't exist. "Open a channel," he said quietly. "All frequencies. Let them hear me." When Nira nodded, Toran spoke. "I am Admiral Toran. I surrender. My crew surrenders. Please, no more killing." The response came immediately, in perfect Imperial Standard, the primary language of the Empire. The voice was calm, almost gentle, and unmistakably human in its intonation. "Admiral Toran. I am Captain Jiho, of the United Earth Systems Defense Force. We did not want this encounter to go this way. We attempted to warn your government. They chose not to listen. You are being allowed to survive, so you can deliver a message." "What message?" Toran asked, his voice hollow. "The coordinates and timestamp I'm transmitting to you now. Your leaders will meet us there. Or what happened today will happen again, on a much larger scale. Humanity is no longer hidden. We will be acknowledged." The transmission ended. A data packet arrived, containing spatial coordinates and a time, 3 cycles in the future. Then the unknown vessel simply vanished, leaving no trace it had ever been there, except for the debris field of 16 destroyed warships. Toran collapsed into his command chair, his legs no longer able to support him. Around the bridge, his crew sat in shocked silence. They had just witnessed the impossible. They had been destroyed by something that didn't exist in any record, any database, any historical account. "Get me the emergency beacon," Toran finally said. "Priority Alpha transmission to the throne world. Tell them we have a situation. Tell them everything." As Nira worked to comply, Toran stared at the coordinates on his personal display. Somewhere in his mind, he knew this was just the beginning. The Empire had encountered something it couldn't understand, couldn't predict, and couldn't defeat with conventional force: humanity. The word meant nothing to him, but he knew it would soon mean everything to the Empire. The message went out across the faster-than-light network, racing toward the heart of Imperial power. In 3 cycles, the Empire would have to respond to those coordinates. They would have to face this mysterious enemy again, and Toran didn't think they were ready. He wasn't sure if they could ever be ready. Commander Hyun hated mysteries. In her 15 years with Imperial intelligence, she had solved countless puzzles, identified dozens of potential threats, and helped maintain the Empire's dominant position across known space. But this mystery was different. This one made no sense at all. She stood in the analysis lab, surrounded by holographic displays showing wreckage recovered from the 7th Battle Group massacre. Beside her, her junior analyst Minho worked frantically, running simulation after simulation, each one failing to explain what they were seeing. "It's impossible," Minho said for the 10th time that hour. "The molecular structure of this hull fragment doesn't match any known alloy. The energy residue suggests weapons operating on quantum probability manipulation, which is pure theory. We can't even build the sensors to test these principles, let alone weaponize them." Hyun reached out and rotated one of the holographic images, examining the twisted metal from every angle. "Clearly someone can build them. The question is who? And why aren't they in our records?" Her communicator chimed. High Chancellor Voren himself was requesting her presence. That never happened, unless something was seriously wrong. She left Minho to continue his analysis and made her way through the intelligence complex to the secure briefing room. Voren was waiting for her, along with 3 members of the War Council. The High Chancellor's normally composed face showed cracks of worry. Commander Hyun, tell me you have answers. I have more questions, Chancellor, she admitted, taking her seat. But I may have found a lead. My team discovered something odd in the historical archives. The coordinates provided by the unknown vessel point to a sector marked as quarantined 12,000 years ago. Quarantined why? Asked Marshal Dewan, the military commander whose forces would have to respond to the coordinates. That's what's strange. The records say the sector was sterile, meaning no life, no planets worth colonizing, nothing of value. Standard procedure would be to simply mark it as empty and move on. But instead, it was actively quarantined with warning beacons and patrol routes. That level of security is usually reserved for dangerous phenomena or restricted research sites. Hyun pulled up the ancient files on the central display. I had Minho dig deeper into archived exploration logs. He found references that were partially corrupted or deliberately redacted. Someone didn't want this sector examined too closely. Voren leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued. What kind of references? Voren, contact reports, first encounter protocols, primitive civilization assessment forms, all dated to roughly 12,000 years ago, all related to that sector, and all marked for deletion, but never fully erased from backup systems. Hyun felt her pulse quicken as she revealed her findings. Someone discovered something there, decided it was dangerous, and tried to hide all evidence of it. A primitive civilization? Daewon scoffed. You're suggesting primitives built weapons, capable of destroying a battle group? I'm suggesting we don't know what we're dealing with because someone made sure we wouldn't know, Hyun replied firmly. I need authorization to access the restricted historical archives. If there's more information about this sector, it will be there. Voren considered this for a long moment, then nodded. Granted. You have 72 hours before we must respond to those coordinates. Find out what we're facing. The restricted archives were located deep beneath the intelligence complex, in chambers that hadn't been accessed in centuries. Hyun brought Minho with her, and together they spent hours sifting through data crystals that predated modern storage technology. It was Minho who found it. Commander, look at this. The file was labeled simply, Earth Assessment, Quarantine Recommendation. Hyun opened it and began to read. With each line, the situation became clearer and more disturbing. 12,000 years ago, Imperial scouts had discovered a planet called Earth, inhabited by a species called humans. The species was primitive by Imperial standards, having just begun to develop basic industrial technology. But the assessment team had been troubled by what they observed. Humans were aggressive, competitive, and dangerously curious. They fought constant wars among themselves but also showed remarkable cooperation when faced with external threats. Their rate of technological advancement was exponential, far faster than any other species on record. The assessment concluded that humans, if left alone, would either destroy themselves within 1,000 years or become a significant power. The High Council of that era had debated 3 options: immediate conquest and integration, uplifting and guidance, or quarantine. They chose quarantine, arguing that conquest would be costly, uplifting would be risky, and the species would probably destroy itself anyway. They erected warning beacons around the entire sector, declared it forbidden territory, and erased all records of humanity's existence from the public archives. They were afraid, Minho whispered. The Empire was afraid of primitives. They were cautious, Hyun corrected, though she understood his shock. But they made a mistake. They assumed humans would destroy themselves. What if they didn't? She pulled up stellar charts and began calculating. 12,000 years. Even with slow development, even with setbacks and conflicts. That's enough time for a species to reach the stars. Especially a species the original scouts described as dangerously curious and innovative. Her communicator chimed again. Commander Hyun, we have a situation at the designated coordinates. You need to see this. Hyun and Minho rushed to the command center, where the main display showed a live feed from the diplomatic fleet that had been sent to the meeting point. 3 full battle groups supported the fleet, ready for combat, and facing them was a single vessel. The same design that had destroyed the 7th battle group. Open the channel, ordered the fleet commander. The screen split, showing the bridge of the human ship. A man in a dark blue uniform stood at the center. Calm and professional, despite facing an overwhelming force. His features were unmistakably human, just as the ancient records had described the species. I am Captain Jiho, of the United Earth Systems Defense Force, commanding the vessel Time's Indomitable Asterisk. I speak for humanity. I am Admiral Torin, came the reply from the Imperial side. Torin had been given command of the diplomatic mission, perhaps as penance for surviving the first encounter. We have questions, and we have answers, Jiho said. But first, understand this. My ship is not alone. There are 347 human vessels currently positioned throughout Imperial space, all invisible to your sensors. We have been watching your empire for 500 years, ever since we discovered the quarantine beacons and learned we had been deliberately hidden from the galaxy. Hyun felt ice in her veins. 500 years of observation. That meant humanity had been spacefaring for half a millennium, developing their technology, studying Imperial weaknesses, preparing for this moment. What do you want? Toran asked simply. Recognition. Humanity will not remain hidden or ignored. We demand equal standing in the galactic community, full access to trade and diplomacy, and reparations for 12,000 years of imposed isolation. Jiho's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. The destruction of your battle group was a demonstration. We do not want war, but we are prepared for it. You threaten the Empire? We inform the Empire of reality, Jiho corrected. Your ships cannot detect ours. Your shields cannot stop our weapons. Your databases contain no information about our capabilities. You are operating blind, while we have studied you for centuries. If this becomes a war, we will not target your military. We will cripple your infrastructure. Supply lines, manufacturing centers, communication hubs. The Empire will collapse from within before your fleets can find our worlds. Hyun watched as Jiho transmitted data packets to the Imperial fleet. Sensor logs, surveillance images, detailed intelligence on Imperial military facilities. The human was proving his point. They knew everything. The Empire knew nothing. Your leaders have a choice, Jiho continued. Accept humanity as equals and negotiate in good faith, or face a conflict you cannot win. We are willing to wait 72 hours for your decision. After that, we will assume the Empire has chosen war. The transmission ended. The human vessel remained in position, making no aggressive moves but radiating quiet confidence. Behind it, invisible to Imperial sensors, were supposedly hundreds of other ships, all ready to strike. In the command center, silence reigned. Finally, someone spoke. Can we win this? Hyun looked at the data Jiho had transmitted, at the intelligence reports showing just how thoroughly humanity had infiltrated Imperial space, at the technological analysis suggesting human weapons operated on principles the Empire didn't understand. No, she said quietly. Not without destroying ourselves in the process. Maybe not even then. Marshal Daewon slammed his fist on the console. Unacceptable. The Empire does not negotiate with lesser species. But are they lesser? Hyun challenged. They developed spaceflight independently. They built an invisible fleet. They've been watching us for 500 years without being detected. By what measure are they lesser? Thanks for watching. The argument continued. But Hyun already knew the outcome. The Empire's pride would not allow negotiation. War was coming. and she was no longer certain the Empire could survive it. She thought about those ancient scouts, 12,000 years ago, who had looked at primitive humanity and felt uncertain enough to hide them away. They had sensed something dangerous, and they had been absolutely right. High Chancellor Vorin made his decision within 12 hours of Captain Jiho's ultimatum. The Empire would not bend to threats from an upstart species, no matter how impressive their first strike had been. Marshal Dewan received full authorization to eliminate the human threat using any means necessary. The first Grand Armada began assembling in secret. 500 warships, including the massive super dreadnought times Fist of Empire Asterisk, a vessel so large it had its own internal gravity generators and carried enough firepower to sterilize a dozen planets. On Earth, Admiral Salmon watched the Imperial buildup from Luna Command Station. The surveillance network humanity had spent centuries building was paying off. Every ship movement, every communication between Imperial commanders, every strategic discussion was monitored and analyzed. She had known this would happen. The Empire's pride would not allow peaceful resolution, not immediately. "They're planning to hit our colony worlds," reported her tactical officer, reviewing intercepted transmissions. 3 simultaneous strikes within 48 hours. Salmon smiled slightly. "Good. Make sure the decoys are fully operational. I want them to believe they've achieved something." The Imperial strikes launched exactly on schedule. 3 task forces, each consisting of 30 warships, jumped into systems identified through analysis of human communications. They expected fierce resistance, prepared for advanced defenses, ready for anything except what they actually found. The colonies were fake. Sophisticated holographic installations on lifeless rocks, broadcasting false energy signatures and communication patterns. The Imperial forces realized the deception too late. Their formations already committed. That's when humanity struck. Human vessels materialized from phase-shifted space. A technology that kept them slightly out of normal reality, invisible and untouchable, until they chose to engage. They appeared behind the Imperial formations, targeting engines and communications arrays. Not a single Imperial ship was destroyed, but all 90 vessels found themselves crippled and drifting, unable to fight or flee. Marshal Dewan was furious. How did they know? How are they getting our communications? And he would get his answer soon enough. On 17 different Imperial shipyards, human strike teams appeared without warning. They used phase shift technology to bypass security, walking through walls like ghosts. Once inside, they placed sophisticated devices that caused cascading failures in construction systems. Nothing exploded, no one was killed, but the yards would be offline for months. The most embarrassing strike came on the military network itself. A civilian hacker named Kiwan led the cyber warfare effort. He had spent 20 years studying Imperial systems, finding every weakness, every backdoor, every lazy security protocol that centuries of unchallenged dominance had allowed to persist. His team didn't just break into Imperial military communications. They rewrote targeting systems, altered navigation data, and inserted subtle errors into tactical databases. Ships started getting lost. Weapons missed targets by impossible margins. Supply convoys arrived at the wrong locations. The Imperial military was eating itself from within due to misinformation. "This is unacceptable," Vorin shouted at his war council. "We have the largest military in galactic history, and we're being humiliated by a species we've never heard of." Commander Hune, now attending these meetings despite her misgivings, spoke carefully. "Chancellor, we're fighting the wrong war. Humans aren't confronting us directly because they don't have the numbers. They're targeting our infrastructure, our logistics, our information networks. Every conventional response we make plays into their strategy." "Then what do you suggest?" Dewan demanded. "Negotiation. Before this escalates further." 90-40. Don. Censored. 90-40. Never. Dewan stood, his decision made. If conventional weapons won't work, we'll use unconventional ones. Authorize deployment of Nova-class weapons. We'll burn their worlds to ash before we negotiate with them. Hyun felt sick. Nova-class weapons were planet killers, devices that ignited a world's atmosphere or destabilized its core. They were forbidden by the Empire's own laws, except in the most extreme circumstances. Marshal, you're talking about genocide. We don't even know where their actual colonies are. Then we'll hit every suspected location until we find them. The order went out. 3 Nova-class weapons were loaded onto stealth ships and sent towards systems identified as possibly containing human populations. The crews were told this was necessary, that humanity had to be stopped before they destroyed the Empire. The weapons never launched. In each case, the targeting ships suffered complete system failures moments before firing. Life support remained functional. Crew stayed alive, but every combat system simply stopped working. No amount of technical expertise could restart them. Ki-Wan had been inside their networks for weeks. The moment the Nova-class weapons were authorized, he activated dormant code that gave him complete control over the launch ships. The crews were left helpless, their doomsday weapons inert, while human vessels appeared and towed them to neutral space. You tried to commit genocide, Captain Jiho transmitted to the captured crews. Remember that. Remember that humanity could kill you right now. But we choose mercy. Tell your leaders what that means. The failed Nova-class deployment was the breaking point. Several subject species, seeing the Empire distracted and weakened, launched their own rebellions. The Thalian Confederacy declared independence. The Morgesh clans stopped paying tribute. The Kelvor Union closed its borders to Imperial ships. Vorin had to split his forces, sending battle groups to suppress rebellions while still trying to fight humanity. It was exactly the situation Admiral Salmon had predicted in her war plans, but there was a price for everything. Commander Hyun, horrified by her government's willingness to commit genocide, made a decision that would haunt her forever. She contacted the humans through a dead-drop communication system, offering to defect in exchange for immunity. She would bring detailed intelligence on Imperial military capabilities, fleet movements, and strategic planning. Her brother, Colonel Taehyun, commanded the security forces responsible for hunting traitors. When he discovered what Hyun had done, it destroyed him. She had always been his hero, the brilliant older sister who excelled at everything. Now she was a traitor, and he had to hunt her. Their confrontation came on a neutral station where Hyun was meeting with human contacts. Taehyun arrived with a strike team, intending to arrest her. Instead, he found himself face to face with his sister, separated by armed guards on both sides. Why? He asked simply, his weapon lowered but ready. Because they were going to kill billions of innocent people, Hyun replied. Because the empire I served doesn't deserve to survive if that's what it's become. Come with me, Taehyun. Help me make this right. You're a traitor. I'm trying to save our civilization from itself. They stood there for a long moment. Brother and sister, on opposite sides of history. Finally, Taehyun raised his weapon, fired a single shot past her head, and turned away. I never saw you. But if we meet again, I won't miss. It was mercy, but it felt like death. Meanwhile, Marshal Daewon was planning his masterpiece. He had studied every engagement, every human tactic, every pattern in their attacks. He believed he had found their weakness. Human phase shift technology required massive energy and couldn't function near certain types of stellar phenomena. The Vardos Nebula was perfect, a region of space where phase shifting would be impossible. He leaked false intelligence about a major Imperial supply depot in the nebula, knowing human intelligence would intercept it. Then, he positioned his reserve fleet in hiding. Ready to spring the trap, Captain Jiho took the bait. Or so Daewon thought. The Times, indomitable Times, led a human force of 40 ships into Vardos Nebula. The moment they arrived, Imperial forces surrounded them. No phase shift escape, no invisibility. Just old-fashioned naval warfare. and Day One had overwhelming numbers. The battle was brutal. Human ships were individually superior, but the Imperial forces had quantity. Vessels exploded on both sides. The vacuum filled with debris and bodies. For 6 hours, the two forces tore at each other. Then Day One received a transmission from his logistics base at Cradon Prime. Human forces had captured it without firing a shot, using the same phase shift technology that supposedly didn't work near nebulae. The Vardos battle had been a distraction. While Day One committed his reserves to what he thought was a decisive engagement, humanity had taken the most important supply hub in 3 sectors. "Withdraw," Day One ordered, his voice hollow. Captain Jiho let them go. He had lost 15 ships and 3,000 crew. The cost was heavy, but strategically, humanity had won again. In the aftermath, as both sides counted their losses, it became clear that this war could not continue. The Empire was bleeding from 1,000 cuts. Humanity was suffering casualties it could barely afford to replace. Both sides were discovering that victory might mean mutual destruction. On Luna Command Station, Admiral Salmon looked at the casualty reports and allowed herself a moment of grief. Then she composed a message to Earth's civilian government. "Recommend we pursue diplomatic solution. Current strategy is successful, but unsustainable. We're winning battles, but can't win the war." In the Imperial capital, Senator Yuna, a reformist who had opposed the war from the beginning, began gathering support for a peace initiative. She reached out secretly to Commander Hyun, now humanity's primary liaison. "Can we stop this before both our peoples are destroyed?" "I don't know," Hyun replied honestly, "but we have to try." 6 months into the conflict, the Velkan Empire was experiencing something it had not felt in 12 millennia. Doubt. Supply shortages plagued military operations as human raids continued disrupting logistics networks. Subject species grew bolder in their defiance. Sensing weakness in their overlords, the imperial economy contracted as trade routes became too dangerous for civilian vessels. High Chancellor Voron faced increasing pressure from the Senate to find a solution, any solution, that didn't involve the Empire's slow collapse. On Earth, President Jiwoo assembled his cabinet for what he knew would be a difficult discussion. Admiral Salmon presented her assessment first, and it was not encouraging. "We've achieved our strategic objectives," she began. "The Empire acknowledges our existence and our capabilities. But we cannot sustain this conflict indefinitely. Our population is a fraction of theirs. Every casualty hurts us more than it hurts them. We've lost 18 vessels and 7,000 personnel. Those are losses we can't easily replace." Thanks for watching. And that's see you next time. Subscribe. One in this well, we're seeing Stefford at it. I'm Marx. "Are you suggesting surrender?" asked the defense minister. "I'm suggesting negotiation from a position of strength, while we still have that strength." Salmon pulled up projections showing resource depletion, casualty rates, and strategic exhaustion curves. "We can keep fighting, but the longer this continues, the weaker our position becomes." President Jiwoo nodded slowly. He had run on a platform of securing humanity's place in the galaxy, but he had hoped it wouldn't require this much blood. "Admiral, initiate back-channel communications with Senator Yuna. I understand she's leading a peace faction within the Imperial government." Within the Imperial Senate, Yuna was indeed building a coalition. She was a Velkan of the old school, believing in the Empire's mission to bring order and civilization to the galaxy. But she also understood that empires survived by adapting, not by stubbornly clinging to outdated assumptions. "The humans aren't going away," she argued to her fellow senators in private meetings. "They've proven they can hurt us. More importantly, they've proven they can remain hidden. Even if we somehow won a military victory, we'd spend centuries wondering if they were out there, watching, preparing for revenge. Is that the future you want?" Senator Boren, a conservative hardliner, wasn't convinced. "You speak of negotiation with inferior beings. The Empire does not compromise with subjects. Then perhaps it's time the Empire learned, Yuna replied coldly. Because the alternative is collapse. And I don't think your pride will comfort you when subject species are tearing the Empire apart. Through Commander Hyun, who had become the critical intermediary trusted by both sides, secret communications began. Yuna and President Jiwoo exchanged messages discussing possible terms for peace. Both faced opposition from hardliners in their governments. Both knew the risks of appearing weak, but Marshal Daewon was not interested in peace. The failure at Vardos Nebula had humiliated him. The continued human raids made him look incompetent. He was a military officer of the old school, trained to believe that overwhelming force could solve any problem. And he had one more weapon to deploy. Without authorization from High Chancellor Voron or the Senate, Daewon activated a black project that had been in development for years, a space-folding weapon that could bypass normal travel time and strike anywhere in known space. The weapon was experimental, dangerous, and its use was forbidden under Imperial law. But Daewon had convinced himself that saving the Empire justified any means. His target was Earth itself. Strike at the human homeworld, and the entire species would have to surrender. He assembled a special operations team led by Colonel Tae-hyun, Hyun's brother, telling them this mission would end the war and save countless lives. Tae-hyun had spent the past months hunting human operatives and dealing with his sister's betrayal. Part of him had died the day he let Hyun go. He threw himself into his work, trying to find meaning in duty since family had failed him. When Daewon selected him for this mission, he accepted without question. The humans started this war, Daewon told the assault team. They destroyed our ships, killed our people, and humiliated the Empire. Now we'll show them what happens when you challenge a power that has ruled for 12,000 years. The space-folding weapon opened a tunnel through reality itself, allowing the assault team to bypass all of Earth's outer defenses. But humanity's surveillance network had been watching for unusual energy signatures. Admiral Salmon detected the fold space anomaly 2 hours before it would reach Earth. 2 hours. That was all the warning they had. All available ships to Earth orbit. Salmon commanded, her voice carrying the weight of humanity's survival. Every vessel capable of combat. Every station with weapons. Everything. If they reach the surface, we've lost. Captain Jiho brought the Times' indomitable times through a hard burn that pushed his crew to the limits of endurance. Other ships followed. Military vessels, armed merchant ships, even civilian craft with improvised weapons. Earth's orbital defenses powered up. Every city activated its shield generators, and millions of people looked to the sky, knowing death might be coming. The Imperial assault team emerged from fold space 500 kilometers above Earth's surface. 20 ships carrying the experimental weapon that could crack a planet's core. They had minutes before Earth's defenders could intercept. Colonel Tae-hyun stood on the bridge of the assault carrier, watching the blue-green world below. It was beautiful, he thought. Full of life, full of people who probably had families and dreams just like Velkans did. And he was about to kill them all. Arm the weapon, Daewon commanded, via transmission. On my mark. Tae-hyun's hand moved toward the activation control. Around him, his crew worked efficiently, preparing to commit an act that would be remembered as either salvation or genocide, depending on who wrote the history. Then, he saw them. Human ships, screaming toward the Imperial formation. Most of them damaged. Some barely holding together. But all coming anyway. He saw civilian vessels. Cargo haulers with mining lasers welded to their hulls. Private yachts carrying missiles they had no business carrying. He saw a species fighting with everything it had to protect its home. Fire, Daewon ordered. Tae-hyun's hand stopped. He thought about his sister, who had betrayed the Empire because it had tried to commit genocide. He thought about what this act would make him, what it would make all of them. He thought about the Empire he had served his entire life and whether it deserved to survive if this was what survival required. Fire, Daewon repeated, his voice harsh. Instead, Tae-hyun activated the emergency self-destruct on the fold space weapon. The device required perfect stability to function. Introducing a destabilization cascade would cause it to tear itself apart, along with anything nearby. All ships, emergency withdrawal. Taehyun transmitted to his team. The weapon is compromised. Get clear. What are you doing? Daewon screamed over the command channel. What my sister tried to tell me. Taehyun replied calmly. The right thing. He overrode the safety protocols, ensuring the self-destruct couldn't be stopped remotely. The weapon began tearing at the fabric of space around it, creating deadly rifts. Some of his ships escaped, others didn't. Taehyun's own vessel was caught in the collapse, pulled into a fold space rupture that would scatter its atoms across dimensions. His last transmission reached Earth, recorded by dozens of receivers. Commander Hyun, you were right. I'm sorry I didn't listen sooner. Tell our people this war was wrong. Tell them we can be better. Then he was gone, along with the weapon that would have killed billions. On Luna Command Station, Admiral Salmon received the tactical update, showing the Imperial assault had destroyed itself. She didn't understand why, but she knew humanity had just avoided extinction by the narrowest margin. On the Times' indomitable asterisk, Captain Jiho watched the debris field where Imperial ships had been and felt no satisfaction, only exhaustion. In the Imperial capital, news of Daewon's unauthorized operation reached High Chancellor Vorin. The Marshal had acted without approval, attempted to use forbidden weapons, and failed catastrophically. The political fallout would be immense. More importantly, Vorin realized that his government's aggressive stance had nearly resulted in an atrocity that would have stained the Empire forever. Arrest Daewon, he ordered. Charge him with unauthorized use of military force and attempted genocide. But the damage was done. The Imperial population learned that their government had tried to destroy an entire planet. Many were horrified. The peace faction in the Senate gained massive support overnight. Vorin's own position became untenable as senators demanded his resignation. Senator Yuna found herself swept into the position of High Chancellor on a platform of reform and peace. Her first act was to reach out officially to President Ji-woo. The Empire offers formal negotiations, her message stated. No preconditions. No threats. We nearly destroyed each other over pride and fear. Perhaps it's time we tried wisdom instead. President Ji-woo, reading the message while standing at a window overlooking Earth's cities that had almost died, sent his reply. Agreed. Let's end this war before it ends us both. In a quiet apartment on Earth, Commander Hyun received a personal message package that had been routed through multiple secure channels. Inside was a recording of her brother's final transmission. She watched it 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Taehyun had been her baby brother, the one who always looked up to her, who always believed in duty and honor. He had died stopping a weapon she knew he must have been ordered to use. He had died proving that even in war, even facing destruction, people could choose to be better than their orders. She composed a message to the new High Chancellor Yuna. I'm ready to help negotiate peace. But first, I need you to know something. My brother, Colonel Taehyun, saved both our species. Whatever history says about this war, remember that in the end, people on both sides chose mercy over revenge. That's the foundation we need to build on. Yuna read the message and understood. Peace wouldn't come from governments alone. It would require individuals choosing reconciliation over retribution, understanding over hatred. The pieces were finally in place. Now, they just had to find a way to make peace work. The neutral station, Horizon Point, had been constructed in the empty space between human and imperial territories, specifically for these negotiations. It was a massive structure, hastily built but impressive, symbolizing the hope that something new could be created from the ashes of conflict. 3 months after the failed Earth assault, representatives from both sides gathered in its main conference chamber. High Chancellor Yuna led the imperial delegation. A mixed group of senators, military officers, and civilian experts. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment. knowing that everything she said would be scrutinized by billions of her people. The Empire had never negotiated with anyone as an equal. This would be a first in 12,000 years of history. President Jiwoo represented humanity, flanked by Admiral Salmon and a team of diplomats who had trained their entire lives for a moment they thought would never come. For humanity, these negotiations represented validation, recognition, and hopefully, an end to the isolation that had lasted so long. Commander Hyun sat between both delegations, officially serving as a neutral mediator, though everyone knew where her true loyalties now lay. She had paid a terrible price for her choice to defect, but seeing both sides actually talking instead of fighting made it feel worthwhile. The first week was brutal. Every issue became a fight. The Empire wanted acknowledgement that their quarantine had been a reasonable decision given the information available 12,000 years ago. Humanity wanted recognition that they had been deliberately denied their place in the galactic community. The Empire insisted on maintaining most of their current territorial holdings. Humanity demanded access to trade routes and diplomatic recognition from all Imperial client species. We cannot simply rewrite 12 millennia of galactic order because one species demands it, argued Senator Boren, still clinging to Imperial supremacy. You already rewrote galactic order when you hid an entire species from existence, countered Salmon sharply. We're not asking for preferential treatment. We're demanding equal treatment. Yuna, watching the negotiations start to collapse, made a decision. She called for a recess and requested a private meeting with President Jiwoo, just the two leaders, and Commander Hyun. This isn't working, Yuna said bluntly, once they were alone. We're both negotiating, like we have strong positions. The truth is, we're both exhausted. Both bleeding, and both facing internal challenges from hardliners who want to resume fighting. We need to be honest with each other. President Jiwoo nodded slowly. What did you have in mind? I'll tell you the Empire's real situation if you tell me humanity's. It was a gamble, showing vulnerability to an enemy. But sometimes, peace required trust. Jiwoo made his decision. Our fleet is down to 60% combat effectiveness. We've lost nearly 10,000 people. Our economy is struggling to support the war effort. We can probably fight for another year, maybe two, but it would cost us everything we've built. He paused. Your turn. Yuna respected his honesty with her own. The Empire is fracturing. 7 subject species are in open rebellion. Our economy has contracted 15%. Military recruitment is down because people are questioning whether this war is justified. I have maybe 6 months before the Senate removes me and installs someone who will either surrender completely or escalate to total war. She looked at both of them. We need peace, not because we want it, but because we need it to survive. The private conversation changed everything. When negotiations resumed, both sides approached the table differently. They were no longer enemies trying to gain advantage, but survivors trying to find a way forward. The Treaty of Horizon Point took shape over 3 months of intense negotiation. Every article was fought over, every word examined. But gradually, a framework emerged. Humanity would receive full galactic recognition as a sovereign power with all rights and responsibilities that entailed. They would gain permanent seats on the Galactic Council, the Empire's highest diplomatic body, which would be restructured to give actual power to member species rather than just advisory roles. The quarantine zone would become human sovereign territory, but humanity agreed to open it for peaceful scientific exchange and trade. The Empire would provide technological data and economic compensation for the 12,000 years of isolation, paid out over 50 years. A joint commission would investigate the original decision to quarantine humanity and publish its findings publicly. Both sides agreed to phased military drawdown, with weapons limitations and mutual verification. Neither side would maintain fleets above certain levels in border regions. Most controversially, the treaty included provisions for other subject species. If they met certain criteria for self-governance and technological development, they too could petition for independent status or greater autonomy within a restructured empire. This clause nearly broke the negotiations, with conservative senators claiming it would end the empire entirely. Perhaps it will end the empire as we knew it, Yuna admitted in one heated session. But would that be so terrible? An empire maintained by force and fear is already dying. We have a chance to build something better, a true federation of equals. We can either lead that transition or be destroyed by it. The final treaty was signed on a day that would be remembered in both human and imperial history. President Jiwoo and High Chancellor Yuna affixed their signatures to a document that fundamentally changed galactic civilization. It wasn't perfect. Both sides had compromised on things they cared about, but it was better than war. Implementation proved messy, as everyone had known it would be. Imperial hardliners sabotaged human trade missions, destroying cargo ships and killing civilian crews. Human extremists retaliated by attacking Imperial diplomatic facilities. Admiral Jiho, now promoted and given command of a joint peacekeeping force, found himself working alongside former enemies to prevent the peace from collapsing. His second-in-command was Commander Rion, an Imperial officer who had lost friends in the war but believed in Yuna's vision of a reformed empire. Together, they hunted down extremists on both sides, proving that former enemies could work together when they shared a common purpose. "It's strange," Rion commented one day as they reviewed security reports. "6 months ago, I would have killed you on sight. Now I trust you with my life." "War is easier than peace," Jiho replied. "In war, you know who the enemy is. In peace, you have to decide every day to trust people you were taught to hate." The question of other subject species became the next great challenge. The Thalian Confederacy immediately petitioned for independence under the treaty's provisions. Yuna, staying true to the agreement, granted it despite fierce opposition from conservatives. The Morgesh clans and Kelvor Union followed. The empire that had ruled 47 galaxies began transforming into a federation of independent but cooperative states. Not everyone was happy. Senator Boren led a faction that condemned Yuna as a traitor who had destroyed everything their ancestors built. There were protests, some violent, demanding a return to imperial supremacy. But there were also celebrations. Species that had lived under imperial control for millennia finally governing themselves. Commander Hyun founded the Institute for Human Imperial Understanding, an organization dedicated to teaching both cultures about each other. She brought in academics, artists, and ordinary citizens from both sides to share their experiences and perspectives. It was slow work, changing hearts and minds, but she believed it was the most important work she had ever done. Kiwan, the hacker who had caused so much chaos during the war, became a legitimate security consultant. His expertise in both human and imperial systems made him invaluable in protecting the fragile new networks of trade and communication. He particularly enjoyed the irony of being paid well to secure the same systems he had once delighted in breaking. President Jiwoo retired after negotiating the treaty, satisfied that he had achieved what he set out to do, securing humanity's place in the galaxy. His successor would face the challenges of actually making the relationship work. But that was how democracy functioned. Leaders did their part and passed the responsibility to the next generation. 5 years after the Treaty of Horizon Point, a joint exploration mission made a discovery that changed everything again. Deep in uncharted space, both human and imperial ships encountered structures that could only be artificial. They were enormous, planet-sized, and clearly built by someone with technology that made both human and imperial capabilities look primitive. The structures were dormant but not dead. Analysis suggested they were part of a vast intelligence network that spanned multiple galaxies. And based on energy decay patterns, they had gone dormant recently, maybe only 1,000 years ago. Something immensely powerful had been here and might return. Admiral Jiho, commanding the Joint Exploration Fleet, stood on the bridge of his ship, looking at the alien structures on the view screen. Beside him, High Chancellor Yuna had insisted on coming personally to see this discovery. "Whatever built this could destroy both our civilizations without noticing," Yuna said quietly. "Together, we might have a chance to understand it," Jiho replied. Separately, we'd just be waiting to die. Do you think that's why the universe brought us together? To face whatever this is? Jiho smiled slightly. I think the universe doesn't care about us at all. But I think your empire panicked when they discovered humanity, because we represented the unknown. They tried to hide us away, pretend we didn't exist. Now we're both facing something truly unknown, and we're doing it together. You're saying our war was pointless? I'm saying our war taught us we're stronger together than apart. Maybe we needed to nearly destroy each other to learn that lesson. I wish there had been an easier way, but history doesn't give us easy ways. They continued studying the structures. Human and imperial scientists working side by side, sharing data and theories. They would spend years, maybe decades, trying to understand what they had found, and when they did understand it, they would face it together. Back on Earth, in a small memorial garden, a plaque bore the names of everyone who had died in the war. Humans and Imperials, soldiers and civilians, all remembered together. At the top of the plaque was a quote from Colonel Tae-hun's final transmission. "Tell them, we can be better." Commander Hyun visited the memorial often. She would stand there remembering her brother, remembering all of them, and recommit herself to making sure their deaths meant something. Peace was hard. Understanding was harder. But it was possible. And that possibility was what they had died for. The galaxy was vast and full of mysteries. Ancient powers might return. New threats might emerge. But humanity and the reformed Imperial Federation would face them together. Not as conquerors and subjects, but as partners in the endless exploration of the unknown. And perhaps that's what it meant to truly reach the stars. Not just traveling to distant worlds, but learning to see the universe through different eyes. To find strength in diversity rather than conformity. To build bridges instead of walls. The Empire had panicked when they discovered humanity because we weren't in their records, because we challenged their assumptions about how the universe worked. In the end, that panic had forced both civilizations to grow beyond their limitations and become something better than either had been alone. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in 12,000 years, it was a future being written by many voices instead of one. And that made all the difference.